Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm going to dive into a geometrical navigation through the subjective realm. And so I want to speak about various ways the human mind conceives dimensions and can work with it. Um, I went through life living through various ideological systems. At first, I was identified by what I was living in, and then I realized it's a structure, it's kind of like a house. So I began developing a relationship with my ideology that I was projecting active conscious identification in that like subjective projection, but it's as if the subjective projections were not ultimately the thing that was moving the projections. So I began kind of catching on to this sort of distinction that really separates the analytical philosopher and the continental philosopher, that there was an unknown experiential kind of presence of a dimension simultaneously occurring. So I kind of began to question the way that my mind had shaped and conceived dimensions. And so I realized that it is, how can I tell you, there's something in the human psychology that when we are afraid, we grab onto something. When you feel like suddenly the floor underneath you is gone, your hand reaches for stability when your feet are not stable. So it's a situation of kind of, in that moment, I found myself detached from this kind of major ideological system that I was living in. And what really happens is you enter a sort of void and a sort of unknown where still your mind is grabbing for ideology. So it's kind of like you as a human being. Imagine right now, whoever you are, imagine we just take you and put you in a different world, completely different dimensional world. So when you are in that world, you're still the same person. You still have the same habits, yet the world has changed, the environment has changed. So I found this kind of I became sensitive to this distinction of self and world. And I realized that sometimes myself is defined by the environment. The voice of the environment has become the voice of my inner realms. And then I noticed sometimes the inner realms become the voice of the outer realm, the moments where the free will requires application in the social system, in the cultural system. These are things that there must be efforts to maintain. Life is not about just planting seeds, it's mainly about also watering these seeds until their development. That means in your life, your free will allows you to make certain decisions, and then you got to go along with these decisions. You got to trust the feet that are walking a certain way. And so really that's the true strength of life, that you realize the journeyer is the vision of it, is the point of it. And as Matsuyo Basho, the Zen master, would say, the journey itself is my home. Therefore, it's as if life was not defined out of its destination, out of a success that's in the future, but it was as if the present was enough before the past and future had spoken. There was a brilliance in just existing prior to being in a sort of category of identification. So as I became sensitive to this distinction of self and world, I noticed some moments in life myself is changing and I'm conscious of it. Some moments in my life the world is changing and I'm conscious of it. And so the relationship of the human being with its world is moments where it is happening to its world, and there are moments where the world is occurring to the human being. Now, before I can get into really how we can geometrically navigate in our subjective realms and our inner realms, I gotta kind of make the distinction that, so eventually I'm telling you my own story, that I began questioning the systems that I was living in. When you live somewhere, you fully accept it. When you sleep on your bed, you fully accept your bed. Do you know? And so it was as if I noticed my mind is dressed in ideology that I have not chosen. That means some of it was just the voice of the environment. Some ideologies, it's like you go into a country and they have a certain restriction of attitude towards things. Any person who's ever experienced racism or any sort of ism is going to realize this, that it's like realities differ, and the voices of these realities based on how the external civilization acknowledges it are different. One person in one environment may have a very strong voice, but one person among a different crowd may have a very weak voice. So what it is that it's like the child's dependence is on a singular dimension. Love seems to go towards the singular. All the religious traditions, all the mystical traditions that have a sort of devotional component, it is going towards a singular devotion. You're loving something that is within. The whole religious mindset ultimately, when especially in more polytheistic traditions. It's kind of like you can say it like this: the common denominator between monotheism and polytheism. It's like whether there's a bunch of gods or where there's one god. It's all the movement of the cosmos is divine will ultimately. So what that means is certain people in their ideological systems, it wasn't enough for only their body, their physical body, to have a personality. They required a personality. So I consider religious people to be oh my god, why is this disconnected? I consider religious people to be macrocosmic behaviorists. That means they are defining the laws of nature as behaviors of a sort of ultimate individualism. Okay? Because even, to be honest, this is something that the Western mind, I think they confused and they kept going. The polytheism that we find in, for example, India, when you go look at the Bhagavad Gita, there are sayings in there that those who follow a divine agency, those who worship a specific god in the afterlife, will be administered. But all the gods are worshiping the one god. Do you know? So in some sense, though, of course, Vedic tradition is very, very complex. Vedic metaphysics, it's like a wonder of the world. All the metaphysical structures, all the ways that human beings and various cultures have opened up to the unknown, these are fascinating. And hopefully in this life, one day, either my vision or the vision of someone else will create a museum for the unknown, for the unknown. Do you know how remarkable that is, that the foundation of our civilization's knowledge is just based on conditions, rather than discovering that which is unconditional. And that which is unconditional moves beyond the language threshold, sometimes being undefinable. That means it's like the language of your mind cannot contain the experience of dimensions that transcend dualism. So anyways, I became sensitive to this sense of self and this sense of world, and I realized that if I choose to make the world my origin, I am not in control of myself. Therefore, if you feel you're a child of this earth, yes, there is limited free will, but you'll never feel like a god in this world. The only place that you can feel as if you have full responsibility for the creative efforts and movements is actually behind your eyes. So I noticed and I asked myself, I'm like, what is this? How are we not, how is it that we have the sophistication to acknowledge gravity, as so it appears to us as an invisible force, yet its consequence makes us feel as if it's there. When you let go of an object, it falls down, and we animate the reasoning behind this by a sort of force. Like, you tell me, what is it? Tell me a more supernatural concept than energy. you know Energy is kind of like strangely like God. It cannot be created or destroyed. It's everywhere, and it's within everything, and every sense of mind that has gained a watchfulness capacity is energetic. So it's kind of like human existence is a certain energy in a certain universal part of this, like this cosmic landscape in our universal sector that has emerged. um, uh, um, a conscious energy that is an energetic expression that is conscious of itself. Now, I ask myself, how is this energetic expression conscious of itself? And immediately I realize, of course, you look in the mirror, what do you see? You see your biological constitution. You see how atoms are under your command, being strangely your body, you know now, when I say the you, your body, and all that, that has to do with the subjective realm. So I notice every moment has an objective dimension to it and a subjective dimension. Now, the relationship of the objective dimension with the subjective dimension is very crucial, but something strange has happened, guys, that the world has not acknowledged the subjective realm. We just think we have thoughts and we think we are those thoughts. We don't have a from the language that is defining the world and causing our decision making, because language is programming. It can program a person. If anybody's listening, can you please tell me if my voice is cutting on and off, or is it fluid? Because there is oh man, this is so This streaming service is kind of like, there's this green box here that says like kilobytes per second, and sometimes it goes to 0, and I'm like, oh my god, is this being recorded or not? But anyway, anyways, let's hope it is. And what else can you do? To attain perfection in the objective realm is not from holding on to it too much. I hope everything's recorded for this talk. I hope. Anyways, so I began putting aside every idea I ever had. I found myself acknowledging myself as if my eyes in the present moment were had opened up and new. I found a disengagement. It was I suddenly felt I had nothing in common with all the archetypes I possessed in every memory I had. It was like a complete transformation of my memories where I realized I am owning thought. Just like how you own an object, you say, this is my object. I realize it's like out of a landscape of endless subjective projections. I'm just taking a bunch and saying that's me. I am dressing up in my, how would I say it, in my, wow, thank you, Cindy, in the chat section for telling me. That's very relieving. So what I'm saying, guys, is ultimately I became sensitive that my conscious attention and free will in the moment can move something else aside from my physical body. So I realize there is a strange relationship, as if the turtle has a relationship with its shell. And sometimes when you're living as an external kind of oriented being and suddenly the world gets too cruel to you or it becomes unfair to you, what happens is like that turtle, you go inside. And I was thinking, what is that kind of shell? That shell is our subjective self. It's our inner life. There's a life, there's a sense of you that is in front of your eyes, and there's a sense of you that is behind your eyes. Now in this talk I am focusing on the sense of you behind your eyes, and how behind your eyes there is an ability to consciously move. Now this is a crazy concept. I say it's crazy because how far our history has evolved is that we feel we can, how can I say it, it's like, how do we navigate when there is no body? And that's the thing. I found the resolution is that you become the world. So what that means is in front of your eyes, you're an individual self. Behind your eyes, you are the world of that self. So it's intentional. So guys, that was the thing. The reason I did it was, first of all, I wanted to see how many people pay attention to that. The other reason was the reason I have the what you see MWRITHIN, because it was like at the time I was like, how poetic the word like Mr. MR and the word within are within one another. Plus, MW is the acronym for Mr. Within. So I was thinking like the MW being at the beginning. I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, there was a sort of based on a sort of idiosyncrasy. Like there was a unique feeling to do it this way. I don't know why. You know, ask the logos, the ancient Greek inner guiding voice. Ask that. You know. So, anyways, guys, to continue because there's much to cover. So, geometrical navigation through the subjective realm, I came to the conclusion that, okay, there's an objective self, and then there's a subjective self that changes. So, after kind of distinguishing that there's a subjective self and there's a subjective component to the moment of being and an objective component, I began to see that all the physical actions I do are falling into a way my attention is containing meaning. Right? So it's kind of like the way we experience life has to do with how we hold them. And this is why attitude and behavior was very crucial. And then we kind of came to the realization that at least the Stoic mindset was one of the virtue was in one's behavior, how your attitude was to life kind of was as important as what you did in life, because your attitude suggested the context you find yourself present in, you know. Uh, it is true that we are evolving creatures, but and as we are evolving creatures, really you can't judge evolution too much. You cannot look at a moving system and find a static definition that will satisfy it. So once we get this sort of contentment that it's okay for the imperfect to be members of to be manifest, it is okay for the incomplete to be incomplete. That means it's kind of a level of philosophical speculation where you see perfection in imperfection, not meaning you're denying progress, but means that it is okay for manifestation to be. So you see, it's like you got to ask yourself, is my problem in the moment any person who has any sort of problem? I feel, anyways, um, I was pretty much getting to this vision that once you're sensitive of your objective realm, once it is easy, you're content. Content means you're okay. Like, think about a person could have many problems in life, but when you look at suffering, it seems to be, it tends to be specific. That means nobody suffers 24/7. And if they are suffering 24/7, they will internally find moments of stillness. The human being is something that if you move too much, everything becomes suffering. But if you are, and at the same time, if you're still too much, the suffering of the inner realms can approach you. But the thing is that it's like honoring the unknown flows of life, which I will get to in regards to how we navigate in the inner realm. So pretty much I just want to establish that I notice there's an objective self, a subjective self, then I notice there's an objective realm and a subjective realm. Then I wondered if there was an objective evolution. What was the subjective evolution like? I figured that out. I realized that it was kind of like a caterpillar kind of situation, that at the end of our objective evolution there was a metamorphosis. So what that means is a sort of pattern. It's like, think about it this way, that it's like there's this sphere, this invisible sphere, kind of moving all over the earth. Do you know? So in everywhere this invisible sphere goes, um, guys, I'd appreciate it if you just stick with MW for the for these talks. But what I'm simply trying to say is that there are many games that occupy one's life, and the true success is not per se destination oriented, it is momentary discretion and discrimination oriented. And in ancient traditions, this interpreted as abidance. Abiding by something that you already are, rather than trying to be something you are not. It's kind of interesting, you know. Regardless of the macrocosmic kind of origin story you entertain, you'll see it's like human beings have a long-term kind of sense of their life, and they have a short-term sense of their life. When you want to navigate your inner realms, it kind of means you want to move something that if your eyes were closed, you can still move. That movement can occur. So you can say it's a sort of sub effort, you know. So think of your mind right now. Anytime, every day you wake up, think of your mind as if various, like, imagine like, we are throwing different balls on the we are pushing these the billiard balls on a billiard table. Do you know? And so think of as if when a person is conscious, it's not just instant decision making. The free will has to lie to itself to feel free. Do you know how many people ignore the chaos of their moment to find order? Do you know? So and it's not the right approach, because you cannot be on a sinking ship and then just cover your eyes and think the problem is solved. There's something about the world that calls for the human design to engage it. It seems as if, like, when man goes in, is something brought this animal outside of the cave. We stepped out. And so if there is any definition of evolution, it would have to do with our attention moving in new ways, ultimately. So what I'm saying is how you navigate your inner realms. For me, it appeared geometrically. For me, at least, I can share is that I never thought, like, I was kind of like, raised in an environment that was theocratical, in a nation that was theocratical, and then, a part of my family was religious. My father was very oriented towards Sufi spirituality, and so I was raised around traditional ideas. And the cool thing about life is that you don't just compare objects. You can't just it's like you don't just have the ability to compare one object to another object. That's ugly, that's beautiful, that's nice, that's not nice, that's good, that's bad. It's like you don't just have that ability. You have an ability to relate subjects to subjects, and also the object and the subject to the void. That means unless you have a sort of contentment with that pitch black abyss behind your eyes, to be attentive to subjective phenomena becomes a bit complex, because it means that the emotions are not arising out of your free will. So it's like you can say, like, I don't want to say that this is parallels with the concept of the New Age community's concept of channeling. I don't think you should let thoughts navigate you ultimately. What that means is ancient tradition said the mind is a lousy master but a good servant, you know? And also, there has been this saying that you must serve before you command. So we're kind of given this riddle that the mind, we should administer our intelligence consciously, right? Like with our free will, But at the same time, the void is there. So when a human being, in my own metaphysical kind of substructure recently I've developed, is that I say a person who can acknowledge these four dimensions. These are dimensions in the sense I have opened up in through my vision. A person who's comfortable with these four dimensions, they can navigate and move their subjective realm. And you got to understand that just like mastering anything, until your personal truths engage, nothing, you will learn nothing. I'm telling you, Galileo said the biggest thing. I don't know. The educational system is so ridiculous that that I'll tell you this. It's like I was shared so many ideas during my years of schooling, but very little about observance of how emotion plays a part. How a person can be the most rational, intellectual, the most perfect kind of standard of a human being, and then suddenly an emotion can arise due to a sort of change in the landscape they perceive. That means ultimately we're conscious perceivers of landscapes. And, like right now, as Mr. Within, I'm saying to you that we are observing inner landscapes. And now these inner landscapes, so we can't just only move through them, we can ultimately discover the nature of it. That means there's something about an honest human being staring at you that makes you realize it is okay to be you. I've experienced that many times. There has been times where I have spoken and I just knew people in their minds are like, what is this fool doing? And there's been times where I have spoken and it's as if I saw three chess moves ahead, and what I said inevitably was the destiny of the outcome. And so what I realize is that my life and my intelligence is appearing to me in various elevations. Some of these elevations are subjective and incredibly language oriented. And if your relationship with language doesn't change, your relationship with how you're defining all your experiences won't change. So this is why I say that it is very crucial. It is very crucial to study before any metaphysics or anything your relationship with the language that you use to be reality. I don't know if I fully told you the Galileo quote, but you can't. I'll just repeat it in case. Um, because guys, sometimes when I speak really fast, um, I kind of give into the flow, so I think of something and 100%. I don't know if the communication was vocalized or it remained in the inner realm. I found myself. I believe I was in Florida. I was walking in the street and I suddenly saw the most unique kind of visualization of my lifetime. One of the most unique. It was like the birth of my ability to move in my inner realms. And I noticed something happens, that people's minds have a sub behavior. That means it's strange, but I feel this sentence can stand, that some people their minds like them, some people their minds dislike them. And I think it has to do about how the maintenance of the inner life is. That means it's like about how many moments where some part of you knew you had to truly engage and yet you didn't. There is something, I playfully I say this, but it's kind of like divine regret. And it's moments where the authentic self was a potential, and yet it wasn't made into a probability. There wasn't the effort to do the right thing even when one knew. Now, what the right thing is human beings have been wondering about that all along. Is it emotional based, our morality? Is it because we're sensitive to each other's pain and suffering that we're like, holy shit, maybe this world can be a better place, a gentler place? The moment this violence eradicates on our planet, that's the symptom of an advanced civilization opening its wings. And by the way, guys, feel free to share any comments. I'm a person who language will never be like bullets to me. So you can feel free to share anything. And uh, those who do not fear the order also do not fear the chaos. So I was saying, I had an experience. I was walking on the street, and for the first time, while my eyes are open, I mean, I've paid enough attention to know, to know that what is of not all the time, but most times I have a sense of what I am imposing in the moment and what the moment is before I am imposing. I've imposed a sort of relativity, you know. So what happened was I was walking on the street, then in I say my subtler planes of abstraction and imagination and visualization, I began to see this I have a very intimate relationship with a geometrical shape. And it's an inverted triangle inside a circle, inside an inverted triangle, inside a circle, inside an inverted triangle, and it's like this endless relationship. And so what happened in that moment was I even remember it crystally, like perfect. It's kind of sometimes fascinating to remember something from your subjective realm because it is much more temporary than your objective realm, you know? That means thoughts come and go much quicker than atoms. The cells in the body change slower than the various ideological perspectives that evocationally through the technology of language we identify with. So anyways, in that moment, what happened? I remember I was at this intersection and I was looking, like something happened where it was this geometrical shape suddenly appeared, and I saw this geometrical shape. It was the first time in my life I was seeing living geometry in my subtler planes, in my subjective realm. It was such an incredible moment. And then this sort of geometrical shape in 3D space. So I was imagining, if you can say that in that moment there was the visualization of geometry copying itself, growing through the image of itself endlessly. And suddenly, from it was as if like one triangle, one inverted triangle, suddenly from the center of it, there was this point, and through that, there came a line. Do you know? And as there came a line, it was as if like that geometrical shape copied its, I don't know how to say it, it animated towards the end of the street. You know how you sometimes see like those construction crates, how they look like all those kind of bars it was a very unique geometrical expression in three-dimensional visualized space. And as that was occurring from every point at the corners of this fractal kind of line oriented three-dimensional geometrical abstraction, I could see for the first time I realized it is not that our imagination is obstructing our vision. It is the extension of our vision. Just like how we have arose from the earth, your imagination arises from your reality. So the more sensitivity you have to what is real, the more you actually are looking at the objective realm, the more in the subconscious there's the roars of sensitivity to the subjective realm. Do you know? So I am telling you, it's like 100% a martial artist with an ability, or someone who's a dancer, or people who physically have an ability to rhythmically express themselves, be in their subjective realms. You are the next level. You're a next level in quotations thinker. You just don't know it yet. You just have not realized that pattern can echo in various dimensions. If you often see sometimes in my talks, I'm having an incredibly like uh, you know to some degree, at least in my angle, I'm talking about something that is about the depth of the world, but then I relate it to something simple. Why? Because when a thought transforms into an emotion, that emotion's meaning can be in multiple places. When I say live for yourself, I mean just to serve. Like I found it kind of hilarious. I felt there was a box on my head that I managed to take off at some point in my life, and that box was an obsession with myself. When I say an obsession with myself, with the archetype, it was like there was no depth. It was like the same way a person is hungry and wants food. It was the same way I was hungering for my success. It was very. I soon realized I am being a savage animal to my own psychology. behaving like a savage animal in regards to my own psychology. And because of simple moments that my efforts were denied in my youth, I felt that the world disliked the effort. Until that box was pulled off my head and I was like, whoa, whoa, everything I thought is hollow. That's the power of novelty. It takes you beyond the language threshold, because it's for the first time man realizing if the free will wanted to study the edge of its will, it would discover a moment where it is not in control. Hence the unknown moves the knowledge. Hence it's as if like you as a human being are just required to be simple, and then your mind becomes the complexity of it. But if you are fragmented by various desires, if you're commanding all the time in every moment for the moment to be the precision of your inner realms, it will be impossible. I mean, in some degree, I treat this world of ours like, I don't want to say like a senior citizen, but like but I look at this world and I realize that it requires decency. Decency is the water that helps civilizations grow. If that sense of decency is lost, people will forget their nature, because ultimately we are emotional. And this was the whole concern. And I've hopefully one day I'll give talks on it. But even though I speak about altered states of mind, I feel that it took us billions of years to attain a sort of sober state. So what that means is it's kind of like sometimes we have to maintain our points of reference. And when you find that human beings are in a dualistic system, the concept of one government to govern a dualistic animal is wrong. So what that means is it's like the governments should be designed like the yin yang symbol, rather than kind of uh, like just one personality to rule a nation. What is that? It's like eventually there will come, just there came a separation from religion from state. I feel there will come a time where there will be a separation from personality from state. And so we will kind of stop allowing personalities to administer reality. Now, this is a new, this like maybe let's say in 50 years, this could be something of concern. The separation of personality from state means that a viewpoint that is not limited to personal bias is giving a response to a system where various personalities exist in. Anyways, guys, all of these is to kind of show that our relationship with our language is transforming how our intelligence remembers or returns to itself as the knower. I feel ultimately you have to ask, what is every experience in your life orbiting around? What is it gravitated towards? The experiencer. I think a good exercise for children all around the world is to wonder, if they were in another environment, how would they be engaged? That means think about, I remember in 2015, I came up with this idea that there should be one student mind. And so we must kind of have all the students from all around the world having access, you know? And imagine like, I don't know, like there was way more to it. There's a talk, if you search it, the one student mind, I've talked about it, but ultimately, let's go back to navigation, geometrical navigation through the inner realms. What I'm saying is, I experienced a moment where I was preferenceless. Life was extremely simple. I was just walking on the suddenly my mind, like a seed planted that has become a tree which on its own was giving fruit, brought forth this fruitful abstraction of living geometry. And so I consider that the next grade, this is something I say, um, and it's kind of cool because I feel I'm one of the um, one of the early birds to share this, but language is the next great geometry is the next great language of all languages. So I experienced it as something that was happening to me more than something I was consciously doing. And it was as if I was sensitive enough and preferences enough to notice my own unconscious movements of mind. And so when I realized that in the subjective realm there is a geometrical, strangely a geometrical dimension, that means in various shifts of altered states, sometimes I've listened to someone and I have not heard words. It's literally I've seen geometrical patterns step into the air. It's as if every concept they have said had translated into a geometrical shape for me. You know, so there is a sort of geometrical resonance, and so it's kind of like just like even like when you think about science, and science is mighty, and I how can I tell you? It's like shake the hand of every scientist you see. But it's that when you look at the atomic kind of worldview, come to realize it is hovering geometry in your abstract realms. And I remember Alan Watts saying something that the word atom comes from the word atomos, and the word atomos means to cut. And so it seemed that it was an effort of division and conquering, division and defining. We divided the atom, we named it. We divided what was there, we named it. We divided that which was within it, we named it. And so it's as if language, the belief and the intimacy with language solidified. You know, language, as far as I know, is the only technology that allows reality to be malleable experientially. I mean, it is very clear. It's pretty common sense that we are intelligent beings. Now, forget about measuring the intelligence. If there is 0.000, whatever amount of zeros you like, 1% chance that there is more to us than meets our ability to comprehend through language, we have to come to a new space where the modern generations realize they have to become responsible for their subjective lives. And of course, political correctness is a symptom of sensitivity, but it's the wrong sensitivity. It's like people are fighting for freedom because before they even see what is free and not free, you know? And so it comes the question that when will the person know what freedom means to be able to even fight for it? And so we cannot ignore that we are creatures that I think what living is an oscillation between wakefulness, between consciousness and unconsciousness. So really what the human life is you're opening your eyes for some time, you close them, you go to sleep. You open your eyes for some time, you close them. You open your eyes, and this constant on and off of vision, no vision, vision, no vision is what is maintaining us. And believe it or not, it's kind of strange, but I am not I'm I'm not trying to kind of promote worshiping the sun, but I do kind of consider that. Just think, we are on a rock that is getting a full tan in from a light beam, and that is causing on, like, imagine you're in a room and constant on and off switch. So I see that we are designed, our psychology is even, our the roots of our psychology is designed in the relationship of light's presence on earth. Do you know that means all of evolutionary effort can be just a game of light and darkness? That could be the main engine, the, of narrative, of a character in a narrative's continuity. As if kind of duality is the engine for infinity. So what I mean is, we've literally been slapped around by light beams, and that is why there's an on-off to our psychology and to our biological maintenance. And so, without the sun, what would man see? The sun is honestly where a lot of morality will go to. It is to bring to light. And that is, I think, one of the main purposes of the human evolutionary design. That there are inner components to how we are existing that can be shared and do not require to remain dormant. And it's like, when in this life are you going to give yourself the ultimate freedom? And what would that ultimate freedom mean? Would it mean to separate yourself from the environment, or would it mean to engage the environment and become defined by it? Or would it mean to realize that when you make your personal truths align with your impersonal truths, objective truths, what occurs is that there comes a sort of win-win in both dimensions. So what it is like the main, I guess, fragmentation of the average man's psyche is the separation through time. It's like, before the dictionary, what was the meaning of the word world? Before language. Before language, what was occurring? There was a pure identification of world change with the external. That means, how fascinating is it that we as human beings, it's as if we managed to somehow have the world change differently behind our eyes, even though for billions of years we were conditioned to kind of just be here. And it's as if evolution was like you outgrew a shirt wearing, you know? every just pretty much individual consciousness cannot exist without an axis of duality. That's what I'm pretty much saying. I'm just saying ultimately we'll see our objective psychology will kind of stretch to how we're identifying with the duality of our astronomical position and the relationship of light with the surface of the earth. And in regards to your inner realms, it has to do with I don't know. At least the way I realized it is that when you confront enough complexity, your mind revalues simplicity. And the simplicity is no longer just a simple simplicity, it's a simplicity that has witnessed complexity. It's as if life jaded you and now you're stable. Why is that stability there? Because you saw an unknown potential that was keeping your inner realms occupied or misarchetyped, you know? There was a time where I realized I need to apologize to myself so many times for so many moments of my life where I did not act and I could. I care for the what ifs of the moment. And you will only care for the what ifs of the moment when experience has an innate value. I don't know. It's like some things in life, like you don't think about your heart, you know, your heartbeat, even though you exercise free will, you know, but you don't think heartbeat. It's like you don't instruct your heart to beat, and it beats. You kind of realize it's naturally preserved. It's naturally beats. Just like that bird flies in the sky, your heart beats, you know. Just like any creature that has a relationship with oxygen, I feel should not be killed. Which would mean, like, what would our human beings' food source be? And I mean, this is not a problem for one man to comment on, but I think ultimately we will find a way to energize ourselves through liquids. I don't know why, but I feel in some of my science fiction writings, I've suddenly gotten these kind of internal visions where we are living in a world where people are just drinking a couple cups of this juice or whatever it is, and by just drinking that their whole system is energized, as if the juice activates a sort of energetic relationship in the body where it's as much as the will moves, the energy arises. So what it is before you can, as the quote would say, the mind is a lousy master and but it's a good servant. How your mind serves you is strangely by you making a conclusion how it is worth to live. How, in what way is it worth living? So you see, self-worth is always easy, very easy to find. Because you control your attention, you can identify with anything, and the moment you identify with something, you feel you have equivalent value to that thing, right? But just like when a person writes, the hand moves in accordance to emotional certainty rather than ideological certainty. Sometimes I've written stuff that, and especially in these talks, like sometimes when I'm writing stuff, it's as if behind my eyes I'm seeing a movie. That means sometimes I even just pause. Like in the middle of the sentence, my hand stops and I'm just watching how the movie's unfolding, you know? And so a synchronization with the inner movie and the objective hand is writing. uh, So Dominic, I'm not sure what you're really referring to. Um, Chat section when you say, is it just limited to duality or is there a multi? Um, yeah, if you can tell me what is. So, anyways, until you respond, I'm going to continue. So, guys, this navigation with the inner realms. Okay, so it means that most people, I understand, most people have attained. Uh, uh, in, in, okay, let me say it like this: most people have attained intellectual freedom. That means they can administer their intelligence with some sort of organization of the other. You know, organizations with some sort of organization aware of the other. Oh yeah, yeah. I totally forgot to explain the dimensions. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Dominic, for bringing that up. Oh man, I brushed past it too early. So I was saying there's four dimensions to acknowledge, and then you can totally be comfortable with your subjective realms. What are those four dimensions? I want you to. It's so easy to remember: zero, one, two, infinity. Zero, one, two, infinity. Just remember these four. Zero represents the void of the human position. There's emptiness here. So once you're content with emptiness, that's necessary. The second thing is the singular dimension. So what does that mean? That means your mind has to be able to be comfortable with seeing things to be separate, seeing things to be singular, seeing another human being and realizing their mind will forever be unknown to you, and so that is why you honor the unknown presence of the intelligence. So it's like the singular is important. Okay, so once you're comfortable being able to see how things are in their own room, you know, it's like first you saw everything is emptiness, now you're seeing things in emptiness, but you're acknowledging it in a singular way. So after you have confronted the singular dimension, you go on to the dualistic dimension. So Dominic, listen up here. So you go up to the dualistic dimension. So we went through the number one, zero. We went through the number one, and now we've gone to the number two. Now the number two has a codependent relationship with number one, but number one has a codependent relationship with zero. So ultimately, it's like number two has a relationship with zero. So zero is like you can perceive it as the sphere in the center, or better yet, it's better this way. You can perceive zero as this giant concentric circle, and you can see the singular dimension inside this giant circle. And then inside that sphere, there is the dualistic dimension. So what that means is without an ability to acknowledge the singular, you really can't acknowledge duality. Even the number two is like one plus one. Do you know? So you have to be able to understand one, things of a singular nature, and then you move up to the dualistic. Okay, so now the dualistic dimension is very crucial because the dualistic dimension is where the linguistic simulation is happening and where the language of our minds are being governed. Okay, so what is happening is in the relationship of the singular and dualistic reality means at certain moments you think you're a self, certain moments you feel you're part of an endless spectrum of manifestation. It's like, what can you do? The world is big. So the second dimension, we confronted the second, and now why do I say infinity? Because we can go up to as many numbers, endless numbers of dimensions. We can create an infinitude of dimensions, but I say after you have duality, you can endlessly generate parallel realities of that duality, parallels of it. And so what it means is duality is like the sticks and stones if fire is infinity. Okay? So when your mind, when geometry is becoming alive, that's, to be honest, I consider something that is beyond the language threshold. There is no way we can define really living geometry in our subjective realms. Just like how a nature photographer sees like a mountain line, kind of rare mountain line, snow mountain line. Similarly, it's like seeing rare geometrical expressions move in your cellular planes, in your subjective realm. Yes. So when Dominic, when you say both exist in the unknown, again, all dimensions arose from zero. There, it is crucial to acknowledge the void. Many philosophical perceptions fear the void. I feel those philosophers that don't fear the void are the ones to listen to. Because strangely, the void is the birth and death of fear. That means when a person is born, nothingness was your cause, and now you have become something. When a person dies, somethingness was your cause, now you have become nothing. And so it's as if, like the beacon, the cosmos was like, all right, human being, now it's your turn to be yourself. So when you are able to be content and with the infinite dimension, I'm going to just say a few more comments on that. The infinite dimension is strangely being able to kind of like, I remember as a child standing between two mirrors, and that was the first time my mind began fathoming the concept of a parallel reality. Dominic, I'm not sure I understand your comment, your second comment. Before, thanks for sharing that. Um, but I kind of see. Um, oh yeah, yeah. Numbers are a language. Yes, I agree with you, Dominic. You're correct. Numerology is a language. When I realized mathematics is a language, I started caring for it. I'm like, whoa, it's not just something to just learn and memorize. It's you can speak through it. The world can move through it. Now, the same relationship that a person has with mathematics, of course, mathematics is a uh, it is one of the beautiful simulations of reality, one of the best languages you can speak. But I have experienced a geometrical language. That's kind of at least um, a banner I must carry, because it is so fundamental that geometry is going to be. We don't realize it yet, but right now it's like we are a brain that is not in one place. And so imagine as if like this is going to be a strange analogy for evolution, but I'm going to entertain it and just to say it for the sake of the idea. But imagine that the human brain was fragmented and various in the human brain before entering the skull, imagine, was outside the skull. There was no skull, and it was just chunks of intelligence growing in unique ways. These chunks of intelligence eventually, like of course, guys, this I'm saying entertain what I'm saying playfully because the brain grows. Okay, it's like a seed more, but the way I'm saying about the brain, I'm kind of speaking more about the brain here as a metaphor for the mind, that it's like intelligence was fragmented, then it became singular, and then when intelligence was singular, it then became fragmented, and then there was this endless oscillation and endless creation of narratives of freedom and its lack. It's all about all these symbols that we ascribe to phenomena. There's a war of language where in one sentence the meaning of a whole book can be kind of kept, and so that whole book can declare war on that sentence, playfully speaking. So what it means is that the issue is not just in evoking progress and advanced civilization, but the issue is how much, if an advanced civilization was taking place, people would allow it to happen. And when people feel the world owes them, no government governing system will ever succeed. When you feel something owes you, then you are in no way kind to it. It's kind of like when someone really lies to you, um, regardless if the person in another moment is actually not lying and being true, your mind denies. It's as if kind of like the lies were too much. Like there was this story, I think, of this shepherd who, the lying shepherd, who was like there was a bunch of kind of like uh, this kid who had to kind of watch over the sheep, and the kid got bored, and he suddenly shouted, "Wolf, wolf, wolf!" People came armed, and they're like, "Whoa, what's happening?" You know, and the kid's like, "Nothing." There's wolf. It went away, and then the people are like, you know, these rascal kids, you know. Then the people go, and again, the kid calls, "Wolf, wolf, wolf!" People run to come and see what happened, and it's a lie. And the kid does this a couple times, and people are like, "Yo, what's wrong with this kid?" You know, they stop listening. And then when an actual wolf comes, the kid calls, and the people are like, "Yeah, nah, yeah, sure, man, sure. You know, don't worry, the wolf's gonna go in a second." So you see, this is the cost of unauthenticity in the veins of civilization. That the truth gets walked over by its own ignorant expression, you can say. I feel it's kind of like if the person has an ability to look at himself in the mirror, the person has an ability to get acquainted with a dynamic state of mind. And what that means is you got to start treating yourself as attention before thought. And when you can do that, I feel the subjective realms automatically animate, and they animate it to the capacity of your discrimination of what is a component of your inner subjective life and what is a component of your outer objective life. And when you can navigate these, I feel that automatically you're going to kind of realize that um, your evolutionary design is meant to engage its potentials. So, if many people are wondering what is the task in this life as an existential creature, is that we have a sort of experiential capacity. We're also born in a certain time in history, and so it's as if not only do we have individual ways that we function, but we're also, our individuality is highly based on our collectivity. And as many, like pretty much the whole branch of sociology is concerned, that the human being is really a social creature, you know. It's like one does not understand the Marxists until they see the injustice in society. And so this does, what I mean by this is that really a lot of life is about balance. And why balance? Because everybody deserves to be a tourist in this world. So guys, I need a few minutes break. I gotta go get some sort of hot tea or something. So I'll be back in like 2 minutes. Okay, sorry if that was a bit too long, guys. I'm back. The species develops a new relationship with language. By developing a new relationship with language, we have kind of advanced our inner dimensions. The person will begin discovering the major duality that holds everything, and that is of object of observance and the observer. This is the major axis that intelligence displays itself as, because self requires to engage a world. You know what it is? It's kind of like our subjective realms are natural, are like a natural virtual reality. And we have thought that we didn't have control over this natural virtual reality, but we're realizing we do. Napoleon Bonaparte was known to remember things by visualizing a sort of giant kind of drawer, like this kind of shelf with a lot of these drawers that it would kind of open up in long ways. And so his mind had a way to use a certain geometry of a certain metaphor or memory, and in that sense, kind of navigate a lot of his subjective realm. So it does require your own creative innovation. It does require you discovering that you either are defining yourself in a static way or in a dynamic way. So that means when I see life in a static way, sure, give it any name you want, contain it. You have freedom to technically impose any symbol over any object. So, the freedom to be yourself is you having a freedom to impose your subjects on yourself. It's, and so the issue arises when we begin kind of having our inner realities dictate our outer lives. So it's so crucial to first discover this the distinction. That means Rene Descartes was onto something incredible. The dualism of the mind and body suggests that the consequences of the inner realms don't necessarily need to be related to the outer realms. That means a thought can come and go without a need to vocalize it, you know? One thing I should have probably said was that all those four ways to acknowledge the moment of being, dimensions to look at the world through, zero, one, to infinity, I could look at any object and I can notice, regardless of how I connected the subject to the object first, I can shift the subject, I can stretch it, expand it. In some sense, you can play with the clay behind your eyes as much as you want as a being. But the thing is that when the sensitivity of it, it's like establishing of a relationship. it's kind of like there's a sense of self that is known first and moving the unknown, and there's a sense of self that's unknown first and moving the known. The sense of self that is unknown and that is moving the known can't, like, in a certain phase of our evolution, it was our animal instincts, but now through the subjective evolution, it has come into our conscious ability. It was so fascinating to me. It happened as if it was like an explosion of genius on earth, that I suddenly realized every human being I had ever seen had unique eyes that could look at the world, that could see something that was not there before. The capacity, the potential, and the thing about the efficiency of civilization is that it promises many potentials, but it doesn't really make them probable. That means it's like many leaders, political leaders, come into power, and when you look at history, and as they have come into power, they have come into power with promises of good fortune, only to realize that their nature was not as pure as it was in that moment. Technically, we can say everyone has a sort of familiarity with their subjective realms. That means whether you put yourself in the archetype of an artist or not, there are many moments in your life where your effort must come with its own response. There are certain things that you must do in this life, and there are certain things that others must do. You know, that means if they do not, then the world does not move forward. It's as if like a puzzle piece is missing to the completion of the next phase, and that is the engagement of the authentic will, a will that is observant beyond objectivity, beyond subjectivity. Then where are we left with? We are left with our experience at the edge of the language threshold, gazing at the unknown. So it would be for the first time the transformation of our value systems as they return to a sort of unknown, in the same way that our planet is kept by emptiness. It's as if all our psychological significance is kept by emptiness. But because there is something that is active and intelligent, and in some sense its expression is its effort is its expression, we are moving in a domain where it is not just necessary to follow past truth. um, don't treat an ideology as a life vest. If the civilization is becoming like a Titanic. I understand the importance of faith when it comes to the inner realms. Of course, if you don't have faith, you'll never enter a new room. You know. So without faith, it's as if your eyes are closed to the future. Of course, man has a confrontation with the unknown, and all of history and all of knowledge has been to try to penetrate this unknown veil that stands between our psychology, that is animate, and the meaningless and the inanimate. So I found it very fascinating that it's like, to what can I compare my intelligence? To what? To what can I compare eyes that I am only seeing, looking through? So I realized the strange freedom and the strange loneliness. I realized, like, on some level, I realized there is nothing that has ever, no narrative, no language had ever bothered me. I had just played along with the suffering of the moment. So I think that's a path towards an advanced civilization where we're sensitive to how our body moves our mind and how our mind moves our body. Life is kind of like given imagination. It's imagination before you imagined it. Some people feel free will. It's kind of strange, I find strangely, even though the atheist and theist have battles on stage, but strangely, they both consider they have free will. Isn't it strange? It's as if the materialist, how can atoms in space have free will? Human consciousness, human personality is a hallucination of some sort of electromagnetic activity, or electrons are freaking out. Or when we go look at it through a sort of theological perspective, it is as if God's will is man's will. So no person's mind is as important to them as the mind that is running the whole show. You see? So I noticed that whether you're secular or you're religious or whatever you are, you will inevitably conclude through any sort of when there's too much complexity, you'll conclude illusion because you can't process all that complexity. What other choice does your kind of young mind have? Guys, I'll tell you, thanks for your comments, Dominic. Maybe this is a good tangent to kind of go on. I do have a unique relationship with numbers. And I'm not just talking about it kind of from a Jungian synchronistic kind of sense, but I'm like speaking about it in the sense that I, my emotional reality found a translation in my conscious attention to numerology. So what that means is the main difference I found, at least a sort of turn of my psychological vision, was that um, how would I say it? My subconscious, intuitive kind of movement of the logos was synonymous with a sort of numerical pattern, I would say. And so, like, oh, here's the thing I want to say about the psychological turn, that suddenly everything became fascinating to me. Even the most ridiculous things were worth my attention. That was the thing, that it's like my life shifted. My personal dimensions are very rarely in a storyline. That means, strangely, when I'm alone, when I'm not speaking, or when I'm still, I don't a personality. There's no sense that I'm a character in a story. The character in the story tends to light up when I'm in a social setting, or where there requires to be, per se, an individualness. But what is there if there is no kind of archetype in silence and stillness of the self? There is simply experiential presence. It's kind of realizing you are fingers moving on piano keys, and the melody is your choice. Life is a symbiosis between the conditional intelligent patterns and unconditional intelligent patterns. Life is fascinating ultimately because it will always appear new. So that geometrical pattern I would see would be like certain moments I would just look at my, how would I say, look at my clock, and I would see a number that would be symmetrical. For example, I was born in 1991. That's kind of like symmetrical, 1991. You know what I mean? So it's like anytime I would see a symmetrical number, I would feel my mind would be at ease with what was to come. Anytime I would see a non-symmetrical kind of number, would in some sense kind of become overly sensitive. And of course life is kind of when you kind of realize you're not a thought, what happens is you have fun with thoughts. And how you have fun with thoughts is actually you're having fun with allowing inner freedom, which ultimately means you don't let the inner self tell what the outer self to do, and you don't let the outer self tell what the inner self to do. So ultimately, you reside as the witness. The Buddhist middle way is found. And kind of like Lao Tzu's emphasis on the Tao, this the Tao that could be spoken about, he said, is not the real Tao, because the witness is not a concept. The experiential witness is not a concept, even though I'm speaking about it. Sometimes I feel like if a yogi who had meditated in years in a cave suddenly awoke and came and heard this Mr.Within talk, what would he think? What would and I totally understand. Sacred eyes may scold those who deviate from traditional patterns, but like life is worth bringing the new, because what else can you do? The past is past, the present moment is unknown. It's like the person looks and it's like, okay, let's, you do something new. Novelty is fascinating, believe it or not. Mind no longer is the master, where in your service the fragmentation of responsibility to be outside of your experience is gone. You become 100% responsible for how existence is experiencing itself in this moment. And regardless of the language that you have worn, the presence, the moment in its simple way is genius. Leonardo da Vinci says something like, simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. And somebody might look at him and it's like, that's a pretty sophisticated sentence. But Da Vinci was at that point, Da Vinci used both hands to throw an object at this man at the same time. So that's the thing, it just like language, it's something that the free will animates. It's something to express through numerologies, meaning a lot of meaning is self-expression. And when you are comfortable to be an expression of self by realizing ultimately the self has come from an evolutionary process where, do you know, before language you couldn't criticize yourself? You couldn't subjectively look down on yourself. Do you know how many things that people in our modernity are upset about didn't exist for people back in the day to even be upset about? It's like people didn't know. Like if we went back with a time machine to our ancestors, you know, language is a limb of the mind. It is not the mind. It's as if the Titan realizes its shackles were not its shackles, that it is so easy for one to reduce their own value. It is so easy for a human being to destroy something. And really in nature you see that a tree takes a long time to grow, but it can be cut in an instant. A flower takes a while, a long time to rise from the dirt, to conquer its challenges as a moment of intelligence and to rise. And what happens? We, as lovers of a higher dimension, cut that flower, disconnect it from its world, and hold it in our hand and give it to our lover as a testament of beauty. But behind that beauty, there is the chaos of inferior dimensions. It is like that moment where your inner realm gives you a justification to touch life. Sometimes for me, when I see violence, it's strange. The psychological response I have to it is disgust. It's not fear. It's disgust. It's an inability to fathom why an advanced evolutionary being in today's modern society has to entertain violence. It's like, have you not understood that the mind can move in so many ways? And so really it has to come as a new responsibility where we take external violence and at least internalize it. That what that means is it's kind of cool. It's like um, um, it's a military tactic. You cut the head of the snake. So what it means is you deny the archetype's immediate vocalization by shifting the context. That means that regardless of whoever is angry, but you can change what they're angry to, and then they suddenly calm down as if they didn't realize. So when I say we are becoming advanced communicators. That's why I'm sharing this. If you would ask me in 2015 if I felt comfortable speaking about living geometry in my cellular planes, I would say I wouldn't feel it was. I would like. I. I wouldn't have felt it was proper. It's kind of like befriending your intelligence again, only to realize that you're authorized as an existential creature to pilot your experience. And the whole point of making civilization better is that people who tend to have a lifespan of 100 years, that 100 years is like whatever, wherever they're living, whatever they're experiencing is like their wonderland. And so they choose the rides they go on, they choose how to animate their stories. But if we humans are truly in a realm, in two dimensions at the same, means in every moment we can tell ourselves a new story of humanity. And so that is the ultimate freedom, the same freedom the person is finding on an individual level, that, okay, I'm not just what I thought in one moment, you know? So it's like suddenly the civilization we realize is not just what we thought in one moment. So what it is we start thinking of an advanced civilization as this ever advancing phenomena. That means it's as if we're going to try, it's like go big or go home, you know? So anyways, guys, I feel if this talk was an orange, I've squeezed it out complete. Like there's no juice left in the talk anymore. No, I'm joking. But like, if anybody has questions in regards to what I said, in regards to how to geometrically navigate or something, now's the best time to ask it. If not, I will probably share one last story and then fly off from the branch of this moment. You know, there is this imperial swordsman, and this imperial swordsman, the king comes to him and he says, "You have been the greatest kind of instructor, you know, of this imperial army of mine. And it's as if you have advanced your civilization." He's given awards and imperial armor and whatnot. And this man returns from the reward ceremony and he comes home in the Zen story. He comes home and he sees the forbidden. He sees his servant is sleeping with his wife. Like he catches them in the act, and when he catches them in the act, he's like a guy who teaches the king's army how to sword fight. You know, so imagine he comes on and he sees this. So like the audience is like, all right, so this guy's gonna instantly kill him. But we see that the way the man just comes inside and says, the man comes inside and says, he sees them in the act and says, come outside. The first thing he immediately does is separate the man from his wife. Do you know? And he doesn't get angry at the wife. He doesn't demonstrate any anger. He just tells the guy, step outside. You know? He closes the door. He comes outside with the man. And there's certain, like some of his guards were waiting outside or something as he came home to get something, imagine. So in that moment, what happens? He has, two swords. He throws one of them in the dirt. And very calmly, he says to the kid, to the servant, fight. As if like you cannot escape the dishonor you have brought to me. I'm going, now is now or never. And in that moment, suddenly, this servant who is actually just, he was a good person, but it's that the wife was so alone because the man was teaching all the time, that this servant somehow became a release for the wife, you know? So in the servant's eyes, he's like, I was just serving the household, you know? But like, but anyways, he's there, and the servant suddenly shouts the name of this Zen sage, this living Zen sage. And he shouts and he says, I am a disciple of this man, and you must let me meet him once, and I will return tomorrow. And in that moment, the Zen master realizes that the code of honor is too great. That means to live with dishonor was to not be alive, as if that's why in that kind of cultural atmosphere, the servant is in the story. He's not running away, you know, but he wants to. So what happens is the man says, okay. And he just goes inside and closes the door, and only the Tao knows what happens in the kind of conversation happens inside the house. I'll leave that for the imagination of the listeners. But anyways, what happens is this man goes and he goes into the kind of finds he goes to the temple of his Zen master, and he sees the Zen master meditating, and he goes to him and he says, what should I do? What should I do? And in that moment, there's a complete silence. And the Zen master, just by seeing how overwhelmed the mind of this kid is, the servant kid is, is that he just realizes something significant is happening in the life simulation of this human being. And he closes his eyes, and he kind of knows, and it says something like, tell me, what is it? And the kid says the whole story, and the Zen master closes his eyes, and he says, you cannot run away. This is your destiny. Sorry, I don't know if it was a Zen master or it was some sage. Okay. So the sage tells him, you can't run. The sage tells this kid, this is your destiny. And I'll give you one word of advice, kid. When you fight, imagine it is the last moment you are here in this existence. He's like, as if this is something that is to happen. And the next day arises, and we see same time, same place, the imperial swords right in the moment where the imperial soldier, swordsman, master swordsman, he takes out his sword, and right when he's about to throw it, he's getting a sense the guy is coming. He's hearing footsteps. He takes out his sword and throws it on the ground. And then this kid comes, and before, like, the Zen master, not the Zen master, the imperial swordsman, before he says and he can say anything, this kid just picks up the sword and goes savage. He is so, as if, imagine it's your last moment in this existence. what the intensity. And this kid takes the sword, and there is a furious rage of his own retaliation against his own non-existence. And what happens? This retaliation against his own non-existence becomes a pure determination. It becomes the infusion of the animal instinct and the intuition. It's as if the intuition, it's as if all the fragmentations of the psychology are just oriented in the central moment. There's nothing else than this. And so the kid has the sword, and he's fighting, and he's going through very intensely. And at some point, the Imperial Swordsman is fighting too. He's fighting too. He's conscious of the people watching, and he gets the sword and he starts fighting. But after fighting some point, he's like, holy shit, was this servant, was like such a good warrior being my servant this whole time? And the kid is just in a savage frenzy, for like chaotic, universal fear kind of frenzy. And the kid's just fighting. And at some point, the Zen master just looks at the eyes of this kid and sees this kid will not die, will not let himself die. And in a moment of distraction, the sword falls out of his hand. The kid throws the sword out, and like a bewildered beast who has finally hunted his prey, in that moment appears, at least to the Imperial Swordsman. The Imperial Swordsman looks at this guy, and we see the guy throw the sword down as if what hell did I just step out of? And he throws the sword down, and there's a moment where the Imperial Swordsman acknowledges it. He's like, okay, it's like as if life, you have earned your continuity in this existence. With a stare, he communicates this. With a stare and a nod, and the kid leaves. The servant leaves, never to return to that town. It's like that town is no longer a tourist destination. So, anyways, that's the point, that in that moment, that kid, as the story goes, 3 days later, the kid gets enlightened, if I remember correctly. I think it was exactly 3 days. 3 days later, the kid gets enlightened. Why? Because he experienced a pure moment of experience, of experiential truth, not just existential symbology or subjectification. And once we are able to confront the moment at that stature, in that way, where all those dimensions, all phenomenology is centrally witnessing itself, that means your mind is being the world where the self arises in. Your mind is your world, and yourself is being your mind as well. It's like simultaneous projections of various phenomenology, and it's just our attention is the common denominator that infuses all of them to be real. So ultimately, to study our attention is the evolution, the greatest evolution of our language, our experiential attention. It's like the roars of direct experience in uh, the streets of a hollow language. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful.